Welcome to the Ocean Cruises podcast hosted by Andy H. This week we are speaking with Lin Pardey, author and multiple circumnavigator. Lin Pardey is an inspiration to thousands of liveaboard and sailors all over the world. She has circumnavigated twice in engineless home-built wooden boats. She is the author of 12 sailing books, the recipient of countless awards, and in 2000 was introduced to the Cruising World Hall of Fame. Lin is currently in New Zealand refitting a steel boat for another world voyage. If you want to learn more about Lin and her journeys around the world, you can visit www.partytime.blogpost.com and download the latest documentary about her and Larry, The Real Deal, on Vimeo. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, watch the interviews on YouTube, and download the audio on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Well, I've never had much experience with steel boats, and this is my first time on one for more than just delivery or such. I think, like many things, there's pros and cons. So let's start with the thing that did impress me. Is soon after David and I were sailing together, and we decided to sail off to the Pacific Islands. We arrived in Fiji and anchored, did the usual clearance stuff, headed ashore for the shower, the long-awaited shower after 10 days at sea. Yep. And while we were having dinner, or just after we finished dinner, a squall came through. It had been perfect tropical weather. This is in Suva Harbor, as I said. And everybody started running down to the edge of the yacht club lawn, and we joined them to see a 150-foot super yacht take off across the harbor like it had been shot and end up aground. It was way over on an angle by within a few minutes. So David said, "I've got to get out and check on Sahula," and she's a 40-foot Vandestat. There's other complications here. I had an accident and had 5 broken ribs and 8 fractures altogether. We'll talk about that some other time. That's another story.
Okay. That's an intriguing one.
But it happened it happened 10 days previous. But I was able to get into the boat, and when we headed out of the little breakwaters, it's kind of ruffled marine area that's just a breakwater and boats tied bow to the shore. Got out there, and it was blowing about 50, 3 or 4 foot seas running, and we couldn't see the masthead light on Sahula, which is exceptionally bright. And all we could see is there was a big ship laying beam on across the area where she had been, and it was obviously aground. You could tell that she was not where she belonged. And when we were clear of her, there was Sahula laying aground also. You could see that she had grounded out. And when we got on board, there was no anchor, no chain. And the snubber, the inboard snubber and the outboard snubber had both been broken. And there was paint and chips everywhere. The pulpit on the bow and stern were both mangled, and the bulwark rail was smashed in. It was a wooden bulwark rail. Well, it turns out that the ship had broken this 200-foot ferry, about 300 tons, had broken its mooring, and it was a dead ship. It didn't have an engine working at the time, so the crew couldn't do anything about it. She slammed right into Sahula. She ended up upwind, and Sahula then, the ship kept drifting, pushed Sahula down on, alongside her, and fortunately Sahula's anchor snubbers broke and let the anchor run out, because otherwise she would have been rolled right under the ship. And she was shoved into 3 other boats. There's 5 yachts altogether, and 3 of them hit Sahula. Okay, on the side away from the ship. Those other 3 were able to get themselves free of her. Then the ship went aground. Then Sahula drifted off. Well, when I did get on board, which was interesting, I went down below, and the blow from the ship had been so severe that it had snapped the locks on the 2 lockers that were on the uphill side, shall we say, and thrown plates and dishes out. It had smashed even the plastic bowls. Good plastic bowls had just smashed into pieces. So that was a hell of a sharp. That was a real impact. I wasn't surprised that the Corel china, some of that broke, but went also.
Yeah.
So when I then look at the boat and the damage to it, there was just a slight indentation on one spot on the hull. So there's a real advantage to a steel boat. I was amazed I was wrong. And the other advantage was when we had to remove the rails and they had to fix a stanchion base, which the local mechanic did a wonderful job. You just weld it on. It just, it's not like the structures, it's a monocoque structure. So it means you can put things on and you can take things off without having to build all sorts of framework underneath. So there's, everything in life has advantages and disadvantages, but that was one real advantage. They are tough.
Yeah, I mean, if you can take a super yacht whacking into your beam, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, it was a big ferry. It was a big ferry, commercial ferry.
Oh, right.
But then the other 3 yachts, one was a 60-footer and the other 2 were 35 and 40 feet. But still, she came out of it amazingly well. And I must say that the Suvian officials and the ship owner came to the game, and the local tradesmen were amazing. So 9 days later, couldn't fix the bulwark rail completely. They put a Band-Aid on it because it was impossible to fix it with the materials they had available. So we had a little Band-Aid on it until we got to Australia. So that part of the steel boat I found impressive. The disadvantage is what we've got right now, and that is you have to be so careful with electrolysis. And unfortunately, we took the boat in to do a bit of a refit and checking the inside for rust, because every 3 or 4 years you have to check every inch of that boat inside and catch any rust. And there's going to be rust, but in this case we had to get under the engine to refinish a few spots. And when the shipyard mechanic lifted the engine, and we put a new cutlass bearing in, and they were not able to realign the engine with the new cutlass bearing, so had to do a modification on the engine mount, the beds where the engine mount sit. And so they did it, and they did a fine job. Now we've got Sahula on a tidal grid, at home here. I have a little house, and I have a little boatyard here, and we just dry boats out on the tide. So, so it's right next to the shop. And when we were down there looking at her the other day, we noticed some white coral-like growth around the rudder. Started to look at it more closely, and oh my gosh, we got major electrolysis. I mean, really major. Pitting all along the front of the rudder and the prop strut. Got our mechanic over, and we were already preparing to certify the boat, because to legally go into marinas in many parts of the world, you have to show that the boat isn't throwing off electrical currents. So we were going to get it certified. And so when we called the electrician and the certification man, they came over and they said, the people who put the engine back in didn't put the bonding strap to the hull from the engine block to the hull. So it's been, and so there's a disadvantage to a steel boat. So now she has to be hauled out and sandblasted and refinished. And
that's so annoying because that's such a simple mistake as well. And it's not your mistake, it's someone else's.
Yeah. So this being a small country and being a local boat builder who I happen to have known for years, I will be calling him on Monday, and I'm not looking forward to that phone call to see how we can work together on getting her fixed up. But it's coming up Christmas, and that's the worst time of the year to get anything done on a boat here because that's summer here.
Yeah. So of course it is. So Christmas on the middle of summer. Yeah, it's a super holiday. That's such an annoying, an annoying situation to be in. So worst case scenario, you're going to have to possibly replace some steel where the electrolysis is gone through?
But very fortunately, we caught it. You know, it didn't get enlist or something. We can't see. The unfortunate thing is we have to drop the rudder out to get to there's pitting on the shaft. The shaft is very strong. It's very strong. And there, once again, it's on a skeg. It means you can ground the boat out, and that skeg can take it. You know, it's not like a wooden skeg that might not be able to, or a fiberglass skeg. You can put the full weight of that boat on that skeg, and it won't damage it. So no, it's just pitting.
What do you do for drying that boat out? Because that boat is a normal fin keel, yeah.
Long fin. It's got a long fin keel, and rudder on a skeg.
Yeah. So when you dry that out, do you rest it on its side, or do you put those like pegs up against?
No. Well, in this case, we have leaning posts. The boat. So basically,
where you keep it, right?
Yeah. So basically, when we bring her alongside, I have 3 tidal grids here. So when you bring a boat alongside, you get it steadied out. You get it on where you want it. You take a line from the masthead to I have special lines that are set up, so you just hook your masthead halyard into it, and that just keeps it leaning in a little bit, so it's leaning against the posts. When it floats, sometimes it heels a little extra if it's a real high tide. So like she's been alongside for 3 months, and happily
just
sitting
up
there.
And down.
Yeah, and like right now, I've got my little boat, my little playboat boat. It's a little Herreshoff, Felicity, and she's on what we call the little tidal grid. And the good thing is, I can only work for 5 or 6 hours before the tide gets me. So you never work too long on the bottom of that boat.
Never got too hard of a day.
Not too hard of the day. On the other hand, you get a little muddy. So there's a bit of mud under the thing.
We used to keep a boat in North Wales like many, many years ago when I was a teenager. It was like the first boat we got. And we used to keep it in a marina that had it's like a gate that actually dropped up and down. We were fine, but quite a few people that used to like moor up in the estuary, they used to either most of them used to put the pegs. I don't know what they're called, but they used to put the pegs on the legs, side of the top side. Legs, right? So they used to put those up, and then there was a few people that used to like moor alongside the quay walls, and there was a couple of times when we walked past and we've seen boats hovering in the air. So like they haven't let out enough rope. Yeah, there's probably about 2 or 3 times we'd actually seen that. And I was amazed. Like the ropes, well, they weren't massive boats. They were like little 20-foot type of sailboat type of things. Not as heavy as your 20-footers, these are like little fiberglass ones. I was amazed the ropes could take it, and then the cleats could actually take the weight of it as well.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. When we got over to England on our first long distance voyage on Seraphin, Larry done a lot of other long distance voyages, but first time I'd crossed the Atlantic, and we got to Dartmouth, and the boat was obviously she had to have a scrub, and the local harbor, I think he was a guy who sort of took care of the waterfront, said, well, we've got a good tidal grid here. You don't have to pay anything, just use it. And they had a whole area set up beautifully right along the quay on the main street in town. And it was set up with nice concrete barriers, and the fish boats would go up there. Everybody, it was very used by a lot of people. So we waited till there was an empty spot and brought her alongside. And unfortunately, Seraphin the keel had quite a long rounded areas, sort of a beautiful fair sweep. But it meant that she ended up bowed down when she was
She's rolling
dried
forward
out.
a bit. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So we couldn't sleep. So we decided to turn the cushions or the bedding around in the forward cabin. And
all right. So you were head up rather than head down.
Yeah. So we were head up, and that was all fine until just when barely daybreak, the boat started bouncing, and a wake hit her, and she bounced quite a bit, and it sort of panicked Larry because he wasn't expecting that. He woke up and went charging out of the bunk and ended up jammed in the chain locker because he was so used to climbing out towards his feet, right? The way he'd always climbed out of the bunk. And this time when he climbed out of the boat, we were sleeping reversed, and he was literally caught in the chain locker trying to figure out where he was because he hadn't woken up completely. So,
it's good memories of Dartmouth.
That's a memory.
How long did you spend in the UK?
Oh, various times. We on Seraphin, we sailed over there in 72 and spent almost 3 years sailing, and we sailed up to the Baltic. Larry did the round Britain race, sailed around Britain. Excuse me. And I'm just looking at something. So he sailed around Britain. So that was the next year or so. And then the third year we set sail, went down to Spain and into the Mediterranean. So it was most of 2 years.
Right.
And then on Taliesin, many years later, we sailed over for the 1995. We sailed up there to be ready for all of the beautiful events that were happening in 1996, which is the Festival of the Sea in France, where over 2,700 wooden and classic boats rendezvoused in Brest.
Right. Okay.
And then that was wonderful. And then we did 7 different race weeks up and down the English Channel that season. And then the next season, we sailed around Ireland and Scotland, and then came back to England again. And then the third season, we finally headed south to the Canary Islands. No, actually, the Cape Verdes and over to Bermuda.
Right.
So once again, 3 years in and around the UK.
You must like
Great
it.
sailing. There's so many interesting places so much history, so many interesting people. People were wonderful. And the music in Ireland. I'd go back to the west coast of Ireland anytime just to sit in those pubs late at night and listen to all the musicians and locals having just a good old time together. It was wonderful.
Yeah, it's like party town, but not like Cancun or Vegas, like the original type of party town, I suppose. Like good
Dingle definitely is 50. Yeah, Dingle has about 5,000 people and 52 pubs. And in the summer, musicians come from all over the world just to get together and play with the other musicians there.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, you spent like 6 years in the UK in total. Like, that's more time than I've spent there as an adult. So you probably know the UK better than I do. I would imagine so. And you probably traveled the UK more than I have as well, actually, which is pretty. Did you go to the Scilly Isles when you were there?
Yes, we did. Yes. And had a delightful time. Got to know the local sailmaker. The minute you know the local people a bit, it changes the whole scene. So yes, not the best anchorages. But
I've never been. I'm going. I think I've got a couple of friends who've got a Halberg Rassi in. I can't remember the name of the marina down south. Things near Southampton, and we're going over there. I think in April, something like that. So it looks beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it's really rugged and attractive. History, just every inch of it's laden with history.
Yeah.
While we were there, a ship had gone down, and had a lot of containers, and the containers that broke free were filled with children's clothes and shoes. And all the islanders, of course, rushing over the beaches, collecting and trying to find two, right and left shoe of the
Matching
same
shoes.
size.
Yeah.
But then there was the customs man was reminding everybody that they had to register what they took because there was duty to be paid on it.
Oh my
The
God.
locals were ready, and he was a blow-in, as they call him, someone who, an official from the mainland, and they were trying to bamboozle him. So I remember there was quite a bit of grumbling and trying to sneak things in behind his back.
I can't believe that.
Yeah.
So you've got clothes and shoes washing up on the shore of an island from a container, and like Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs is waiting to like tax people who pick stuff up. I apologize. That's bad. How did you find Cape Verde? I'm heading down there in December. I've never been before. I've not spoken to that many people who've been, only a few people.
Remember, they're very desert islands. They don't get a lot of rain. They're just in the wrong place, and they're not, the ones we visited weren't tall enough to stop the clouds. So they're very dry and quite poor, limited resources. We had absolutely no trouble. There was only, I think there was 2 other yachts came through. We were there for about a week and a half, and we paid a young boy to watch our dinghy for us. And people say that's a ripoff. Well, for $2 a day, it helped him. Yeah. Our feeling was it helped him, and he was delightful. And he used to wipe it down for us. It was all clean when we got back. But the music, the local musicians, they play something called Fado, which is wonderful. They're a cross between flamenco and African, and it just. And we spent almost every evening at this one little cafe where the owner was a great violinist, a violin. So our memory of it is just great music and pleasant people. The marketplace did not. I was glad that I did all my shopping in the UK and had a pretty full boat, because there was very little provisions to buy that except some local produce.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
The tomatoes were wonderful. Yeah, but I found it really interesting. I think there should be some good diving around the edges. We weren't into diving at that time, but we didn't do much exploring because we were having a very pleasant time right there.
I think it's more of like a stop by, or most people treat it as like a stop by place. I've got a friend, and I think they stayed for like a couple of weeks just waiting out for a weather window. They actually said exactly the same. They said it's very, very poor. It doesn't rain, except when it does every so often, it absolutely smashes it down, and it brings like loads of trash into the ocean as well. I don't know where that comes from. But yeah, they said they loved like the restaurants and cafes, and like you go in there and you get people off the street. They're just like walking in and they just start singing to you and dancing, and like, they're just generally like really happy people. So yeah, I'm looking forward to going.
Yeah, I think I'd go back. I wouldn't hesitate, but I don't think there's a lot to explore on land. I think it's definitely
a place to hang out, just waiting for a weather window. Did you spend a lot of time in the Canaries when you were going from Northern Europe? I'm presuming that was for an Atlantic crossing.
Never been to the Canaries.
No way.
And I've crossed the Atlantic 7 times.
Whoa. That's really surprising. So what like, say you're leaving Europe and you're heading over to North America, or Central America. What were the routes that you were taking?
Let's see. The first time I went, we came, of course, from Chesapeake by way of Bermuda and the Azores. I've done that a couple times, 3 times. That's leaving Europe. We were headed for the Chesapeake, so we stopped in Madeira and then over. And then the next time when we went down to the Cape Verdes, we were headed for Brazil. Right. So we left from from the Azores down to Cape Verdes. So we didn't go to Europe that time. We're kind of crazy. We spent quite a bit of time in Europe, and then we sailed over the east coast of the US and spent 3 years exploring up to Maine and around the Chesapeake and New York area. And then all of a sudden decide we want to go around Cape Horn to get back to the Pacific. And so we sailed to Bermuda and then over to the Azores, waited out the cyclone season there, and then sailed down to Cape Verdes. So no reason to go to the Canaries that time. When we were delivering boats out across the Atlantic, Madeira was the better stop because it was easier in and out. And
maybe there would have been more there as well. What year was it when you were, or what year was it when you would have passed the Canaries, like when you were on your way down to Cape Verde?
The last time we went by there would have been 2002.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So it would have been fairly populated and pretty commercial then. Yeah. I was thinking it might have been when you had your first boat, because that would have been like quite a way back. I'm not sure if there would have been much in the Canary Islands back then.
Yeah. No, well, we went east about, so we didn't go back across the Atlantic on her. So,
right.
So on Seraphim, although it was a zigzaggy route, we went pretty directly on a circumnavigation. It might have taken us 11 years, but but on Taliesin, we just went, we went where we heard there was the next good party or next good regatta. So we crossed the Atlantic a few times because you're going back and forth.
It says a lot about like how much you love sailing when you are sailing around the world looking for different ways to sail. Like, you have to really enjoy it.
Well, the thing that we loved about both of the boats is they were really good sailing machines. And Larry had a racing background. And so he chose to have a boat that had a real good light wind sailing ability.
Okay.
And of course, they both look like antiques, these boats, because they were really old-fashioned appearing, the style. But they sailed like little witches in the light winds. So there was nothing more fun than arriving someplace and being invited to join a local race. And they're just being nice to say, oh, that funky little boat. And we'd get out there, and for some reason, most of the places we were invited to sail, the winds were relatively light, Cape Town being an exception. But we get out there and all of a sudden turn on a good bit of a performance with the boat. And all of a sudden, the local guys were really interested in this. It kind of made us friends immediately. People don't mind being beaten when it's in a fun situation like that. Yeah. So instead they found it interesting that how come that funky little boat that's full of all that cruising gear can keep moving like that? So then they'd start looking at the design and the underbody and the fact that she carried a real sail plan. So to us,
was it just the sail plan, or do you think was it something to do with the specific shape of the hull? Because neither of those boats look like they would move fast at all, especially in light winds.
They're special. The reason they go in light winds, very fair underbody, no protrusions, no propellers. The rudder has fairing strips that fairs it right in. So the very clean flow of water, relatively low wetted surface because it doesn't have the hard turns. And a good powerful sail rig, but the weight of the boat means that once you get her moving, she keeps moving.
Yeah, she keeps momentum.
So we've been racing against some of the little far 30s and such, and a wake comes, some boat comes by and sets up a wake. They bounce and jiggle around in the really light winds.
Exactly.
We just keep steady and moving. And the other thing is both Larry and I are just, for some reason, we both are particularly happy sailing in very light winds. So we probably concentrate more.
Yeah. Oh, it's much nicer if you've got a boat that can like head upwind pretty well and you're in like light wind conditions. It's so nice, like doing 5 knots with like 5 knots of wind upwind. It's great. Low seas.
It's my favorite. Yeah. I'd say the lucky thing for us and the thing that kept us cruising so long is that we thought of our boat as not just a way to get across an ocean. It was our toy also.
Yeah.
So we had a home, we had an adventure machine, and we had a toy. And I would say that joining the local races was one of the best things we ever did, because it introduced us to people immediately, local people. And we had friends the minute we got somewhere. To the point where when we came to New Zealand, we joined a two-handed race when we first got to Auckland, because it was a series. And Larry and I said, well, we've been practicing two-handed sailing quite a while, so we'll ought to try this.
Yeah. Everybody knew as well.
Yeah. And so we got out there and did exceptionally well. We won the series in our class, the 30 feet and under. But we bought a home that season by accident in New Zealand unexpectedly. We found this wreck of a place that we saw as potentially perfect for us. New Year's Eve, which is in the middle of the summer here, we were thinking, it's rather quiet, our first New Year's here in New Zealand. And all of a sudden, a parade of boats comes sailing in and anchors. And it was 12 of the different boats from the two-handed series decided that we shouldn't spend New Year's alone. And they made a party at our house for us. I mean, at 7 o'clock in the evening, we were saying it's going to be a bit of a quiet one. And so the two-handed, going racing changed our life here.
Yeah, it just immediately injected you into the community in such a great way as well.
Yeah, it was really good.
New Zealanders are just so nice, such friendly, open people. I've traveled around quite a bit and I've made quite a few friends from there, and yeah, they're just great. So nice. I've never met anybody from New Zealand who I thought was the slightest bit special. They've all been so nice.
Well, let's just say New Zealanders are so pleased that people go to all that trouble to get down here that they want to make them feel welcome.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it, actually. Yeah, it is quite a way. It's quite a way down and it's quite a way around as well.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So
what attracted you to that country? I mean, you've been everywhere. What made you want to get a place there and actually spend more time there?
Well, we didn't, we sailed down to New Zealand about 2 years after we launched Taliesin, because we were asked to meet up with a couple we'd known through the years, Eric and Susan Hiscock. Yep. And we had only a few times been able to spend some time together. And they said, come on down to New Zealand. You haven't been here. You'll like it. And we can cruise around together for a while. So we decided, what a lovely invitation. And because, their books inspired us, and they're interesting. They love sailing. So we got down here, and they arrived a couple days later from Australia, and we all agreed to rendezvous at a place that they really liked called Kawau Island. They said, because we'd said we wanted to go down to the city and get to know and we were going to spend the winter here. And they gave us a little note to introduce us to some people who had been nice to them when they were. And the reason they said Kawau Island is there's this anchorage, this little bay that is completely protected and lovely and quiet. And they had spent a winter writing a book here.
Okay.
And so we sailed down here. So we decided to go down to Kawau. But and the other thing that happened is we read in the newspaper that there was a regatta held every year where it has starting lines in 9 different places. And everybody then races into the city. And it's called the Anniversary Regatta, and up to 1,000 boats will be racing on the same day, and they all converge on the city, and they have a big festival on shore for them. And so we said, what a fun thing to do. So we said, we'll go to the Kawau Island starting line. So we sailed to Kawau Island, and the Hiscocks were supposed to meet us, and another couple were supposed to meet us here, and then we were all going to sail into the city. But the night after we got here, and we'd anchored in the main harbor, which is called Bonaccord Harbor, where there's a little yachting club. And the second night we were there, a westerly gale blew in, and the anchorage got really uncomfortable. And we actually at 4 a.m. lifted our anchor and started reaching back and forth to get out of we couldn't get out of the harbor. There was no lights at that time. There were very few navigation lights around the island. So we were reaching back and forth until there was just daylight, just enough light to sail around to this quiet cove that Eric and Susan had told us about that we could see on our chart. And there's a reef at the entrance, so we had to have some light to be able to pick up the reef. And when it was just barely daylight, we sailed around and anchored in here, and it was so calm, and went back to sleep. In the morning, Larry wakes up, looks out the companionway, and he says, "Lynn, come and see this place." He says, "If we could ever find a piece of property in a place like this, wouldn't it be fun to have something for when we get old and decrepit and don't want to sail anymore?" So, oops, excuse me. So we laughed about that, and then we were wintering here, and we'd rented an apartment near the city to set up a dark room so we could develop all the photographs for Larry's boat building book, 642 of them. And one day Larry says, "Let's go up to that town near that island, that Kawau Island, and see if there's anything that might be for sale." And that we could afford, because we had the money from Seraphim. We'd sold her for 40,000 American dollars, which was quite a nice gain for a little 24-foot boat that we loved. But we'd put it in the bank, and the real estate agent took us out on his boat over to the island. Or no, we came on the ferry, I think, and it was low tide, so we walked around and looked at a few places that were for sale, and they were cheap. At that time, nobody wanted waterfront places, and it was on an island, which and there's no roads at all on the island, and no shops. It's just an island with a few, about 100 people living on it. And then he said the only other place for sale around here is that place across the bay that used to be a boatyard, but you wouldn't want that. He says, "I've tried to sell that place for 8 years."
Right,
and we said, "Well, let's go look
Didn't
at
know
it."
his client very well, did he?
Yeah, and he said, "Dan, it's out of your price bracket." So we went and looked, because these other places were, 12 or 15,000 American dollars. And so we looked at this place, and it had a boat shed that looked like it was falling down. It had a house you couldn't get into because it was overgrown with ivy and jasmine. You needed a machete to come to break into it. And the cliffs had fallen away, so you couldn't walk between the house and the boat shop, and the wharf was condemned.
Right.
So there's no flat ground.
So
and we looked at the place. And long story short, both of us said, when we were able to get a machete and go into the house, we both said, if we spent some time fixing that up, even if we decide we didn't like it, we could probably make a little profit on it and sell it on if it just turned out. But if we could build a seawall and reclaim just a little bit of land near the shed, it'd be a nice place to retire, and we could do a little boat work. And so we made the owner an offer that was half of what he had on it, and he accepted it. And then all of a sudden we said, "What have we done?"
We weren't expecting that. But if it's been sat around for 8 years, and like the estate agent is literally telling people nobody will buy it, it was ready to be. It was ready to be purchased.
That's it. And it turned out to be an amazingly interesting and fun project. It took us, we built seawalls. But Larry's boat building skills, and the fact that we were, writing and working, and we were finished Larry's boat building book here. And it's, through the years, it's been changed quite a bit. We now have 1/8 of an acre of flat ground because we did build seawalls, and they let us, create flat areas. So it was a very fortunate thing. And the best thing is that whenever we felt like sailing and leaving, we could just leave it, because being on this island, and there's no theft, it's been very safe. And a neighbor was always willing to check up. So we've gone away up to 8 years at a time without coming back. And it's always sitting here waiting for us. And it turned out to be a very wise thing. And the shocking thing is we traded a 24-foot boat for a miniature boatyard and a lovely little cottage. And then Larry tore the old cottage down and built a new one all out of cedar. It's been a fun project. But this is not talking about sailing.
No, but it's talking about what came of the sailing, I suppose. How did he build a seawall?
Yeah.
That's a pretty large civil engineering task to undertake.
It's just like you build a boat. Everyone says, how do you build a wooden boat like this? Well, Larry taught me in the beginning, you don't build a boat. First, you build a keel timber. And you build a beautiful, perfect keel timber. And then when it's finished, then you build a stem. And then you connect the stem to the keel timber. Well, seawall's the same thing. First, you dig a hole and you put a post in it. And we literally dug each hole with a hand operated post hole digger. We dug it down and almost a meter, and then we lugged the pole up that we had there was at that time a big schooner brought all of our timber over from the mainland. Nice. And I mixed the cement. Each hole had to be filled with cement to support the pole, and I did all the mixing in a wheelbarrow. And I mixed 20 tons of cement, loaded time in a wheelbarrow. I had strong arms by the time we got that first wall built. Yeah, so
that's really
it was an interesting project. Yeah. So
and what did you do to like backfill against the wall? Did you just like move rubble and rock from somewhere, or did you get that brought in?
No, we hired a digger and they took down a hillside. We were fared in the hillside that was behind it. And that's how we created the flat land. But we built altogether 750 feet of seawalls, 229 meters of seawalls.
That's crazy. By hand.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. No, I've worked in construction my whole life. So when you just said, oh yeah, Larry just built a seawall, I'm like, that's pretty serious.
Yeah, well, it was really only impressive. 2 meters high. Yeah, the highest part of it's only 2 meters.
Okay.
So it's not,
but still.
Not like 95 tons of timber.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's like a serious piece of work.
Yeah, it was, but you do it bit by bit. We always said we take our time, try to enjoy it. There's times when you don't enjoy working in the mud, but we always used to say that Larry tended to build the capital in our life, and he earned the capital, I earned the money. So by that time, the writing had kicked into the point where I could cover most of the costs with the articles we were writing in the books. And when we got a little shy, Larry would take on a reno job on the classic yachts. And I'd help him on that. So the skills that we learned from building our own boats, from sailing, we did splice quite a bit of wire down here in the shop, for classic boats. And so the two of us, we enjoyed working together on these various projects. But like I say, Larry was the real builder of the two of us. I was just the materials purveyor and backing him up. And I also had the Band-Aids ready all the time.
I suppose like from his perspective, like with him building building these incredibly seaworthy boats out of wood, when it comes to doing a seawall, that would actually be pretty simple, because it is just like dig a hole, mix some concrete, put a big massive stick in it. It's just the size of it. Yeah. So just going back onto the boat you've got now, you've done some pretty heavy miles in wooden boats. What made you go for a steel boat?
Well, I didn't go for a steel boat. When Larry was no longer with me, I decided to go on a dating site because I so enjoyed all my many years with Larry, 50 years with Larry, and the sailing. And I met a few guys, pleasant, but it wasn't an unpleasant experience. But then a friend came over from the U.S. to visit for a few days, and when he was leaving, I took him over to the local museum on the far side of the island, and there he met a Australian sailor single-hander, and the two of them were chatting and over a cup of coffee. And and my friend Ty said he'd just been with Lin Pardey, and this guy said, "Oh, I've got their Storm Tactics handbook on board. That'd be fun to meet her sometime, or meet them sometime." And then Ty explained that Larry was no longer with me, and then I got a phone call from my friend Ty. He said, "Lynn, I've met this really nice, very shy Australian sailor who would really like to meet you and have you sign his book." And there was no romantic idea or anything. It was just, and the guy is only a mile away, anchored in another bay. He says, "Call and invite him for a drink." Because he says he's too shy to do that, to just show up. And I actually said, "Ty, I'm too busy right now," because I was coordinating a music festival for the people on the island here. 1,000 people coming in a few weeks for a festival. But Ty said, "Lynn, you owe me a favor. The guy was really nice, and it'll only take an hour of your time. Do it." So I called this guy, and he said, I said, "If you want to sail over here tomorrow and have some drinks." So he did accept, and he anchored on the far side of the cove, so I couldn't actually see the boat that well. We had drinks, laughed. I've never laughed so hard. Found out he was not the least bit shy, but he just didn't, had never thought to come and have that. He didn't even know I lived on the island. And then, and that was that. He left his phone number because he was heading up north to get the boat refit. And he says, we'd been talking about an anchorage I'd never seen on Great Barrier Island, about 40 miles from here. And he said, "Would you like to sail over there with me?" He says, "I'm always taking crew." He just finished a 10-year in the circumnavigation, was on his way back to Australia to finish the trip, but he wanted to sail over to the Barrier and Great Barrier Island. And he says, "I'll call you when I'm heading over there, and you can join me and my friends." Well, I was dating these few guys. I hadn't heard from him, so that was, out of the question. And I said to one of my neighbors that I really wasn't hitting any guys, or didn't meet any guys that made me laugh. And then I said, "The nice guys to go out for lunch or dinner, but I like to laugh." And she says, "What kind of, have you ever met anyone that made you laugh?" And I said, "The last time I laughed so hard, there was tears rolling down my face, was that crazy Australian sailor who came and had drinks that extended into dinner. And we laughed so hard." She says, "Whatever happened to him?" I said, "That was 6 months ago. I have no idea." I said, "He was, there was, she said, "Did he leave his phone number?" And I said, "I have no idea." So she went and grabbed my guest book, because I have a guest book here. And she grabs my phone and she texts him and invites him for dinner. Now, we don't even know if he's in New Zealand.
Right, okay.
I grabbed the phone and I said, "You can't invite someone for dinner at my house when, if they come over, they can't go home because the ferry doesn't run after 6 o'clock.
Good point, yeah.
And she says, "So?" And to make a long story short, he called and said, "Thank you very much, but his daughter's having a baby, and he's going to fly over to see his first grandchild so I said, "Oh, that's too bad, because I'm actually leaving in 10 days to go on a seminar tour that included England and the US, and I'd be away for several months." And I said, and he was planning on sailing on to Australia when the season opened, when the cyclone season was over. Okay. And he called back an hour later and he said, "I've been thinking about it. My daughter doesn't need me there when she's just first having the baby. I can wait a week or two." So he came for dinner. Yeah. And he never went home.
That's such a cool story.
Or we sort of well, actually, he went back to the boat for 4 days. I went to visit him up at the boat. So that's why I am sailing on a steel boat.
Right, okay.
It was a delightful romance, and it still most of the time is. And
and that's
we hit
like
it off wonderfully. And
a series of coincidences as well.
absolute coincidence. So he had a steel boat, and he did not choose the steel boat looking for a steel boat. He did something quite different. He's a lawyer and solicitor and barrister, but he actually became a law lecturer and worked in environmental law and created the legal framework for the World Heritage sites in Australia.
Oh, well.
So yeah, it's quite interesting. But when he was 60, he said, "That's it. I want to go sailing." And he'd had sailing experience and cruised before, and when he was young. And he's a mountain climber, so he loves getting out and stretching those legs.
Mhm.
He's 6'2". I'm 4'10". It's quite funny. But he decided when he wanted to have a cruising boat that there are so many boats out there, so many choices, that he wanted to narrow it down. And he said, I decided to look for Van de Stad design because I know they're well designed, good boats. And there's a lot of them around, but that way I narrow the field down. And he says, 34 to 40 feet, that's my limit. And that's where he started looking. And he came across, and he said, fiberglass, steel, whatever, just the boat that he wanted. And he found Sahula, and he had many good reasons for choosing her, but it wasn't because of the steel that he chose her. He would have been just as happy with glass fiber. And but then he did a lot of ditch crawling. He went right up from the Black Sea, right up through Europe, through Bulgaria, and just up the Danube and down I forgot all the different. And he loved it. He really enjoyed exploring the European canals. And he said the steel boat was pretty useful there because no matter how careful you are, all those locks and walls, he said, came through without any damage at all. Yeah. He says there's a bit of red paint on the sides of a few locks from his boat's bright red.
Right.
So he found it a very, and as he says, I'm not a woodworker. He says a pencil pusher. He said, so I couldn't take care of timber. And so it's worked well for him. It really was a good choice.
And what's it like for you sailing a boat that's got an engine in?
Let's just say, it's different. It's very different. It's a real joke is that when we first, we were just a new relationship. He had decided to sail around New Zealand to get down to Fiordland before he sailed over to Australia, and he already had that planned. And a friend was joining him, one of his daughter's best friends who had sailed with him previously, wonderful Charlie. So they said, is it okay if I just join in and Charlie comes too? Well, it turned out to be delightful. If I was going to just choose a granddaughter, it would be Charlie, and we're still good friends. But we sailed down to Fiordland, spent a month in the fjords, spectacular country. And then Charlie had to fly home to England. So we dropped her off in Bluff. And for the first time, we're making a passage, just the two of us. And it's just a 4-day passage. And we left and we got out. I'm not sure if it was leaving Bluff or Dunedin. I forgot exactly which port. But when we got out, it was a little bit rock and roll. It was a bit rough. And I was on the helm. And I noticed that the paddleboard that David carries on the foredeck was moving a bit more than I liked. I said, David, come and take the helm while I go and tie up the paddleboard. He comes out and he said, Lynn, you're still new to the boat. How about I'll go forward and tie it? He says, I just, you haven't moved around that deck that much. Okay. And I don't mind being treated like a sweet little old lady. It's kind of nice. And so as he's stepping out of the cockpit, I said, just as a joke, David, don't fall overboard. And he starts going forward, comes back, and he turns around and he comes back and says, Lynn, as a matter of interest, what would you do if I did go overboard? So I looked up and we're running wing and wing, got the pole up, and I said, well, the first thing I do is do a slam jibe and leave the jib backed until I checked around, and got everything sorted out. And then I put her on a close reach. And he says, wait. How about starting the engine?
Right, okay.
Oh, I didn't even think.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. So, yes, it is new. There's some really nice things that I love about having the engine, and that is you push a button and the anchor comes up.
Yeah, if you've got a windlass.
That anchor, that windlass. And what I particularly like about that is, instead of getting upset when people anchor too close, just lift the anchor and move ourselves.
Yeah.
Don't think twice about it. And if you don't like the anchorage, you go move somewhere else. And in the fjords, it was really nice to have that anchor windlass because it's very deep anchorages.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So I like that, some of the aspects of the engine, but I hate the fact that it adds so much maintenance. Not that the engine itself, it's a wonder, this was a brand new engine when he put a new engine in when he bought the boat. Said that was the first thing he was going to do. He did not want to, he said, I don't want my engine to teach me how to be a mechanic. So he put he pulled the old engine out, put a new one in, and that served wonderfully. It's a Yanmar 50 something. But because you have the engine, you add other things. Yeah. And the boat is a simple boat by modern standards, but we still have, always a work list of things that are not working perfectly. Went through 3 wind generators before we just said it's not worth the trouble, but it meant that we were having to contact manufacturers. They finally gave us our money back on the one we had because they agreed that to have the controllers blowouts on 3 different times wasn't up. So I'm just not used to the complications, and I find it frustrating because I sailed for years without ever having to stop to get parts for something because we never had breakdowns.
Yeah.
And,
it's a good point.
So I find
the only type of maintenance that I've ever had to do on my boat has been related to like the engine or the electronics connected to it. Yeah, the rig and the sails, no issue.
No problem.
Ever. Yeah.
No. So what I have done that's been fun is I've introduced David to light air sails because if there's wind, I want to be using it. And so we've added a big nylon drifter, we call it. Great big nylon Genoa. And it's got a sock on it, which David likes. I don't like because I'm just used to pulling him in. But he likes it, so that's fair. And it is a bigger boat than I'm used to. We have such pleasant sailing when we get that nylon up, where it's some of the nicest sailing in the world when it's flat waters and you're moving along at only 2 or 3 knots, but you're moving, you're getting there.
Yeah.
So she's a nice boat. But, but the equipment, I just get very frustrated with. If it isn't,
it's not necessary.
That's the thing. But look, the chart plotter's kind of, it's kind of fun to have it, but I still like the paper backups because it gives me the big picture.
Yeah.
But I enjoy the man, and I enjoy the fact that I get to still keep going places, and I just love just being out sailing, and I'm looking forward to some of our sailing plans that we have now.
What do you need to do? Because I know you're going for a refit. I've seen some photos that looked like you were doing quite a lot of work. But what's actually left to do on that?
Oh, well, just to put now it's all going back together, just to put all the trim on. We've ended up with an all new galley. And, well, no, not all new. We're keeping 2 of the cabinets are just going back in. I just finished varnishing them. So it's finishing the woodwork. And the plumbing's in. We got new water tanks, which are the thing is that David found that when we were doing steel check the inside of the hull. Yeah, that's one thing about steel boats. Anyone who's listening, if you're buying a steel boat or thinking about it or building it, make sure every piece of furniture can come out so you can see what's behind it.
Yeah, they're important.
Because the man who built David's boat was a professional steel worker, but an amateur woodworker. And when he put the interior in, he didn't consider getting in back of it for, inspecting the hull.
Yeah.
And when we were doing a hull inspection, we found rust, a bloom, as I call it, under a water tank. To get the water tank out, we had to literally cut the bunks away and cut all this, the water tank out. It was a wooden tank that was molded in place. So that meant we had to take that part of the interior out, and then decided to do a full check everywhere. And that's why a third of the interior got removed. And, the only way to get it out was to cut it out.
Right.
So now it's going back in. So you unscrew a few panels and things come right away. So
that's really good.
That's important.
So what are you thinking in terms of like a plan or a route for where you're going? Like what do you want to do next?
I don't like to tell people what I'm going to do, because then if you don't do it, people say you failed. I mean, we've never told people we're going around the world, because what if we sailed for 20 years and never got around the world? We just tell them, what we'd like to do, maybe a bit. Yeah, I'm pretty cautious about it, but
yeah.
But look, one of the things we are thinking, if all goes to plan and the world is sorts some of this COVID restrictions out, this year we want to sail up to the north of New Zealand and explore a bunch of the little gunk holes. But then we are thinking of putting the boat on a ship and shipping her to Chichester, because I have a wonderful younger friend. He calls me mom. His folks call me mom too. So he sort of adopted us, Larry and I.
Okay.
And he's got a fellow named Ashley Butler Boat Works, and he's now opened a ship, taken over a big yacht construction yard in Chichester. So he said, send the boat over here and then come on over and start your cruise from here.
Chichester in the UK?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, nice place to spend.
We have some place. Yeah. So we want to set sail from there. If that would be a fun thing to do, and sail some places in Europe that we haven't been to. Neither of us have. And then both of us would like to sail up to the Great Lakes of the U.S. And that's just a general idea, and we'll see where it takes us. But we are planning that far ahead, I can tell you. But I'll be 80 by the time we're heading across the Atlantic, and health warranting, I figure I'll keep doing it as long as it's fun.
Yeah, like absolutely. And do you think that there might be a book come out of the back of this, or a documentary or something like that?
Oh, I'm always enjoying writing. Right now, actually, I'm working on a book called Passages.
Okay.
Which is about it's a little different. It's about the difficulties that happen when a wonderful partner starts to fade away, and then making the decision to move on in my life I had to decide when Larry went into care. He had Parkinson's and Parkinsonian dementia, and developed that as we were sailing through the Pacific the last time. And 47 years of voyaging, I can't complain too much, and a wonderful marriage. But deciding when he went into care that at that point that I would take the leap and move when I met David, and then the sailing we've done together, and showing a romance novel at the age,
sounds like
at an older age, that life is life's been very good to me, very interesting. and had some great sailing. And there's some wonderful sailing stories about that, you know, with Larry and I the last year going through the Pacific the last time was a really interesting time. So that's what I'm working on slowly. And I don't make promises as to what date it'll be finished, but I would have been farther along, except I spent quite a bit of time helping Mike Anderson when he was making this documentary about Larry.
Yeah,
the real deal documentary. So that I won't say it set me back 6 or 8 months or a year on my writing project, but it definitely was done at the same time I would have been writing it. And I think the end results of the documentary are beautiful.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's fantastic to watch. Yeah, how did it go? Because it was launched at the Annapolis Boat Show a few months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it was a month and a half ago, and it got really nice reception. And
Brilliant.
There hasn't been. It's had positive reviews by everyone who's seen it or written about it, and it's really rewarding. What's really funny is that several people before they saw the video said, they'd read about it was. And they said, "Well, why is there a video? Why is it all about Larry Pardey? Because what about Lin? Would Larry be the same if Lin hadn't been part of his life?" And then when they saw the video, they saw that yes, Larry is a unique individual. He's very different than me. But what I think Mike caught in there is that the two of us contributed very different things to our relationship.
Yeah.
And worked together tremendously. And I never felt left out in that documentary at all.
Oh no, you wouldn't have thought that. Oh yeah, you would have never got that from it. It was it was two people. It wasn't like there was one person and then somebody else was there. It was like there's two people doing this thing together. It was brilliant to watch.
Oh, well, I just hope that, I hope people enjoy it and feel encouraged to get out there. And I think Larry had some amazing quips or little short comments that stuck in people's minds. And Mike really went out of his way to show those. I mean, one of my favorite things that Larry used to say, whenever I said, "God, this is difficult," he said, "If it was easy, everybody would be doing it." Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really important reminder for people who are trying to get ready to go cruising or who are out there cruising. No, it's not supposed to be easy.
Yeah.
And it's that effort that you put into it. It's like the property here. It wouldn't feel anywhere near as special if it hadn't been quite difficult to get it to the point where we got it.
Yeah,
the hard times are important, and the same thing with getting ready to go cruising.
Yeah, I think as well, like from watching the documentary, because now going cruising is so easy. Like you don't really need to be able to sail that well because you can pick weather windows so simply with like the forecasting models that everyone's got now. Boats are like a hell of a lot easier to handle and sail. So like when I watched it, it just inspired me to, I suppose it just eliminates like a lot of the fear or a lot of the doubt. Cause it's just like, oh God, if my situation involves like a windy application and a chart plotter and a radar and this and that, I'm like, this is just so easy compared to like the bravery as well, what you guys had. I mean, like honestly, for me, if somebody said, "Oh, cross the Atlantic without, electronics," I'd be like, "Are you mad? Why would I do that?" But you just went for it time and time again.
Well, the interesting thing that you mentioned that the electronics and such. Remember, windy or predict wind or whatever you use cannot solve the problem of the fact that storms will happen. Weather does change once you're out there.
Yeah.
It can help you. You can learn to choose a better weather window. But I find it interesting when I talk to people nowadays, people aren't learning about the weather as we had to. They're learning how to find out about the weather.
Yeah.
But we had to learn to interpret the weather ourselves and be part of the weather. And people say, well, what do you like or dislike about sailing on David's Sahula, which is becoming very much mine too. It has a completely enclosed cockpit, it has clears, as they say, that you can close off, which is nice for Dodger and bimini, permanent bimini. It's good for my skin, which has been battered for years. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it keeps me out of the weather. And it keeps me from being out on deck, exposed and feeling it change, and watching seeing everything around me. And the chart plotter keeps you from having to go out and take bearings and noon sights. And so you're not part of the weather. You're actually cut off from it in many ways. Yeah. And I think that therefore induces a fear, because if you can't get information from predicted wind, you don't know, you're worried that you don't know what the weather's doing. And
100%.
Where we learned to be looking all the time, and we'd see clouds changing. We'd say, "Ooh, we got a front coming towards us," and we got a little bit prepared. If I saw what looked like an approaching frontal system, I'd immediately make up a couple extra meals that were real easy ready to go, and maybe tidy up the boat a little extra, make sure that the snacks were easy to get to, make sure the storm trysail was ready to go up, because we were watching ahead. So we did quite well with the weather predicting. But the opposite side of it is, because people feel that the weather router or the weather routing applications are telling them exactly what's going to happen, when things don't go exactly right, there's more fear.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. Because I'm sorry, there are times when they're going to be wrong, or the situation changes faster, and you're out there, and you can't just say, "Oh, because I know this information, I can sail out of the way of a storm." Some storms are quite big; they cover a large area, and they do form up quickly. So you got to be ready for the bad weather, and that's practice, learning to be comfortable on the boat, having the right gear. But the right gear isn't that weather predictor; it's that storm trysail. It's that extra handhold that you put on the boat to make it easy for it to get around. It's the confidence you build by learning to move around on deck. And people say, "Oh, I'm going to make it so everything's led to the cockpit." But there's times when something snarls on the foredeck. If you're so used to never getting out of the cockpit, are you ready to go up there and unsnarl whatever that is? Or put an extra lashing on something? Mm-hmm. So it's this preparation. Instead of saying, "I'm never going to hit bad weather," it's saying, "I've practiced, I'm ready, I'm going to avoid bad weather, but I'm going to be comfortable if it occurs."
Yeah.
I'm sounding like a lecturer. I'm sorry, I'm sounding too serious here.
No, but it's experience. No, it's right what you say. Like, I mean, where I sail in like the Southern Med, so the weather forecasting is pretty much useless anyway. It's always wrong. So yeah, whenever you go out there, you've got the wind generally coming from the complete opposite direction. We just did some sailing in Greece, like in October, and one of the skippers who was on the boat, called Herbie, he's like an old school sailor. He doesn't use any forecasting. He just wakes up, he looks at the wind, smells the air, and he's like, "Oh yes, good, we're good for this passage today," or "Oh yeah, we'll have a nice sail." Yeah. And it's like, and he's it's stuff you can learn, but I just find it fascinating because I don't have a clue about any of it. He'll look at cloud formations and which way the wind's coming from, and he'll be like, "Yeah, we'll probably get like gusts in about half an hour, something like that," and then the gusts come in half an hour. So very handy person to have on board if like you're crossing an ocean. But yeah, I think if there's one thing I want to learn more, it's definitely that, just more about like the meteorology side of it. Because if you are out somewhere and you get stuck in a storm, like being able to see a few miles ahead and see what's going on is going to give you a hell of an advantage.
Yeah, well, there's a little book that I recommend to everybody. It's called Instant Weather Forecasting. It's by Alan Watts, I think is the name. It's a little British book, which is Yeah, there's pictures of different clouds and what generally happens if you see clouds like that. And it's a starting point. You start watching the clouds and you start learning from that book.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What's it called?
Instant weather forecasting.
Instant
weather forecasting.
Yeah, I'll get that. I've got a few books on a list now that I need to pick up. So yeah, I'll add that one onto it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So,
right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me again. I think third time's a charm, as they say. But yeah, good luck with these renovation works. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again next.